Welcome to the It's in Queens podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Simmons, and this is the only podcast that focuses on my borough of Queens. This podcast comes to you each week thanks to the Queens Tourism Council and the Queens Economic Development Corporation, or QEDC. Together, they showcase Queens as a destination with something for everyone, whether you live here, work here, or you just want to visit. Queens is filled with so many opportunities to discover new things, from arts and culture to food and entertainment. Some of these gems are hidden, but many don't always get the spotlight they deserve. Whether it's a small local business, an art installation, or a tucked away park, there's always something new to experience in the borough. What's truly remarkable about Queens is the diversity of experiences that are available. From Astoria to Flushing, Jackson Heights to Jamaica, each neighborhood has its own distinct flavor, history, and culture. You can explore the rich variety of cuisines from around the world, visit bustling markets, or attend vibrant community festivals that showcase traditions from countless countries. Whether you're looking for a quiet moment in one of our borough's green spaces like Flushing Meadows Corona Park, or want to immerse yourself in the arts at institutions like the Museum of the Moving Image, Queens truly has something for everyone. And that's not even mentioning our world-class sporting events, cultural centers, and historic landmarks all within easy reach. And coming up the weekend of October 18th through the 20th is a perfect opportunity to discover some of these hidden gems. It's the annual Open House New York weekend, an exciting opportunity to explore the city's most iconic and unique spaces, many of which are typically off limits to the public. Queens is participating in a big way. So what are some of the places you'll be able to discover? Well, I've got the answer. Well, I don't have the answer. The answer comes from Kristin LaBuz, Executive Director of Open House New York, and she's this week's interview. Kristin LaBuz, welcome to the It's in Queens podcast.
Thanks, Jeff. Great to be here.
So Open House New York has been an iconic event for over 2 decades. Would love for you to give our listeners a brief history of the weekend that's coming up and how it has evolved since its founding.
Sure. Well, let me start by saying Open House New York was inspired by Open House London. That was the first city on the globe to host this kind of public festival. And so they started their festival in the early 90s. At that time, there was an architect named Scott Lauer. He was a New Yorker, but he happened to be living in London. He experienced Open House New York London, and he said, I need to bring this back to New York. So he came back to New York. He hatched all these plans. This was August 2001. So we know what happened next, right? 9/11 hit the city. At the time, security was this heightened sense of security, barricades were going up, but Scott never lost sight of this vision. So he got this grassroots group of architects to band together, and they said, hey, what if instead of shutting the city down and closing doors, we opened it up? It was a simple but radical idea, and it took off from the very beginning. The first Open House New York weekend was in 2003, and it opened up 82 buildings with the help of 300 volunteers.
And that's a big premise of Open House New York. I mean, the weekend has a reputation for unlocking some of the city's most unique and rarely seen spaces. What do you think is the allure of events like this for not just New Yorkers, but visitors to New York?
Sure. And so I think that to answer the New York question, New Yorkers are curious, New Yorkers are proud of their city, and New Yorkers love bragging rights. Let's be honest, right? New Yorkers want to see something, they want to get access to something that's normally off limits, to something their friends and neighbors haven't seen. But I really think the allure of Open House New York weekend is the power of place and the pride of place. New York is magnetic. We know that. It attracts people, it attracts talent, it attracts ideas from all over the world. But for those of us who are lucky to call New York home, this weekend offers, this year we're opening up 270 sites across the city. It offers New Yorkers 270 reasons to be proud of New York. And this is how I like to break it down. We live in a big, complicated, sometimes chaotic, kaleidoscopic city, but Open House New York shrinks it, not in the sense of you feel more connected to place, to your neighbors, to the ideas and projects and policies that are shaping our collective future.
And you have had a fantastic legacy of celebrating New York's architecture, history, and culture. I'm really curious how Open House New York selects the sites each year, and then, of course, how the Queens locations fit into the broader festival.
Sure. And let me to just go back to your first question. When we were first founded, when Scott Lauer, 2003, the festival was very much a building specific and architecture kind of a capital A. And it was also pretty Manhattan focused. And over the last 20 years, we've really wanted to expand the storytelling about the city, less about architecture and more about the people's policies, places, the connective tissue that binds us together. And it's also evolved from being Manhattan centric to being a truly five borough festival. So this year we have 270 sites in our lineup. 100 are brand new. And so we're really proud of that mix. We have some returning favorites. We have some legacy sites that have been with us for all 22 years. And we have some brand new things that, are under construction or just came into being. And so the recruitment process is a mix. We always invite back our past participants, but we are relentlessly location scouting. That is one of the best parts of our job on the team of Open House New York, is to be location scouting, to have our radar out for what's new, what's coming online, what can we unlock. And so sometimes it can be a very lengthy courtship process. Like some sites have taken a year to become part of Open House New York weekend. And sometimes some sites just say, sign me up, let's go. I can't believe I haven't been part of this for the last 20 years. And I
And
think this year's Queens lineup really reflects that mix of new and old. So one of the new sites that we are so excited by is the Ravenswood Generating Station. This is New York's only power plant, and this year's Open House New York weekend is the first time the public will ever get a chance to tour the site. As you might imagine, we had to go through a couple rounds
oh yeah.
team to make sure we crossed all of our T's and dotted the I's, but we're thrilled to have that in the lineup. I think at the other end of the spectrum, we have the Vander Ende Onderdonk House, constructed in 1709. It's a landmark Dutch field house. It's the home of the Greater Widgewood Historical Society, and they've been part of Open House New York Weekend community for decades.
And I just noticed in going through the list, there were so many interesting spots. There were a few, even at the airport, you wouldn't have normally, people might have not normally thought of that. How did they become part of this?
And often, the festival is a reflection of our relationship with different architecture firms or city agencies. So we have a great relationship with the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, and we have great relationships with the architects who worked on the project. So sometimes folks pitch us with what they want to share with the public.
And
Another good example, if I may, is how Open House New York Weekend traces the evolution of the project. So a couple years ago, when Queensway was just an idea, we did a panel discussion about it in a room with big visuals, but it hadn't really taken off yet. And over the years, as this project has gotten more funding and attention and traction, they're still part of the lineup, but the tour has evolved to reflect how the project has changed over time, which is really exciting.
and that's really interesting because I would not have thought, oh, I've gone to this site already. I shouldn't go again. I should go somewhere else. So for some people, it might be good to keep going back to some of these sites.
Hmm. For sure.
So what's one of the most common misconceptions about this weekend, so that anyone who's listening that might be like, oh, I'm not sure because of this, you're going to basically correct that misperception.
Let me dispel the notion and let me say, first of all, with 270 sites, we break down the festival into two tracks. We have open access sites, and the majority of the festival is open access. At last count, we had 147 open access sites. These sites are open at any time, no reservations, no tickets needed. You check out our website, they're open from 10 to 2, drop in at any time, and you'll have a great experience. The other track is ticketed sites, and we're New Yorkers, right? We know the reality is we deal with security limitations and space limitations. And so some sites just can't open their doors to the public. So for these sites, they require tickets. These tickets are $6 and they go on sale at once. And that the tickets all drop publicly October 8th at 11 a.m. And so one misconception we hear is that, oh, tickets are sold out or I can't get access to things. Our staff says absolutely not. Some of the best, most exciting, most dynamic sites are open access. So even if you've done no planning, you wake up the morning of Friday, October 18th, Saturday, October 19th, Sunday, October 20th. Check out the website, filter by open access, and explore something really incredible.
So, for those folks who are looking to participate for the first time, I would love some
Mhm.
guidance. Are there particular sites or experiences you recommend that they reserve in advance or that, when they start to plan their weekend?
So when it comes to reserving sites, the reality is that demand overwhelms supply. These tickets will drop on October 8th at 11. By 11:05, many of them may be snapped up. We like to describe it as, it's the Taylor Swift concert equivalent of an architecture festival. And we're proud that New Yorkers have so much demand for this work. But we know it can be frustrating. So our recommendation to first timers especially is focus on open access. There are incredible open access sites in each borough, tons of good stuff in Queens, and really let that be your basis for exploration.
And,
Can I drop some of our Queens
oh, you
favorites?
knew I was going to get to that. I was going to say,
I was
we've talked about a few, but there's so many more. Go for it.
All right. So here's Queens. It's like we have 27 sites in Queens, and there's a couple of clusters of typologies, right? There is so much rich history in Queens. So we have the Van Day Ende Onderdonk House, we have the Bown House Historical Society, we have the Lewis Latimer House, and we have the Bayside Historical Society. So history buffs, head to Queens. You are going to learn something new about the city. Also, when we look at our Queens options, we have a ton of green spaces. We have Socrates Sculpture Garden. We have Sky Farm in Long Island City, a rooftop farm. Listen, anytime you can go to a roof and see sunflowers, you should take advantage of it. We have the West Pond Living Shoreline Restoration. This is a tour at the Jamaica Bay Wildlife Rescue. And then the other cluster we have, of course, is in Queens. We have the airports. So we have TWA Hotel. We have LaGuardia, one of the tours led by the Port Authority. You will go behind TSA and really get access into some of the operations and the design of the new space. And then we have the new atrium that is part of LaGuardia, which has some pretty incredible public art.
And you noted sunflowers. Well, that brings me to one of the other spaces, which is right outside my building, which is the 34th Avenue Open Street, which in front of my building, there is the median, which has a lot of sunflowers. That's why I thought of it. But this is also an interesting opportunity for people to learn more about the Open Streets program.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And we have a very special tour of open streets by definition are open to anybody, which is a beautiful aspect. But this is a tour led by some of the architects and community advocates who have helped make this open streets as robust and dynamic as it is.
And I should also ask, because some people might be like, well, do we make this a family event? Is it family friendly? Can you give some guidance for anyone who's considering, oh, do I bring the kids or not?
Absolutely. We love supporting and engaging our youngest New York supporters. And I'll share, I have a toddler, and she's coming along with me to many sites. We have created a special filter on our website. So when you visit ohny.org/plan, you go to the left side of the page, there's a filter that says family friendly. And we have 24 sites that are not only family friendly, but have specific activities for kids.
And before I let you go, is there anything else you think our listeners should know if they'd like to participate on that weekend?
Can I drop a couple more? I have a couple more
Oh,
Queen
oh,
shout outs.
go for it.
I
I'm
was
going to
like,
want that. This is the It's in Queens podcast. Yes.
listen, it's in Queens. Just the diversity and dynamism of Queens is so special. So here are some specific open access sites, no tickets required. Very cool in Queens. We have Stickbulb in Long Island City. It's a lighting design and manufacturing space. Shout out to Russ and Chris and Ben, who have been part of Open House New York for many, many years. We have the Fort Totten Historic Building walking tour led by park rangers. You will learn something new. You'll get some exercise. The Hindu Temple Society of Flushing, very special site. And the trick here is the pro tip is that there is a canteen in the basement, we've been told some of the best doses in the city. Jeff, I see you laughing and
I've read
nodding.
about this. I've
You've
read
had
about
those
this.
doses, right? And then another very cool site is Materials for the Arts. And this is this massive warehouse run by the city. Every year they divert 1.7 million pounds of waste from landfills. So they are collecting everything from mannequins to theater props to Christmas trees. And then they're redeploying that at schools or at art therapy sessions or at hospitals to help make the arts more accessible for all New Yorkers.
That is wonderful. Any other details you want to share, but also give that website once again as we wrap up, because I want to make sure our listeners know where to go.
Sure. Learn all about Open House New York Weekend at ohny.org/plan.
Kristin LaBuz, I want to thank you so much for appearing here on the It's in Queens podcast.
Thank you, Jeff. I hope to see you out there for Open House Weekend.
You know I will be. And what an exciting event it's shaping up to be. There's so much to explore during Open House New York. It is a great way to learn about the history and architecture that define our borough. And frankly, on the weekend when you want to get outdoors, why not spend it with groups of people visiting places that you might not always get to see? It's a great opportunity to learn, discover, enjoy, and even relax. If you want to explore even more, well, head right over to that website that Kristin gave, ohny.org. Now, if you can't make it to Open House New York, don't worry. There's always so much going on in Queens. And each week, Rob Mackay from the QEDC and Queens Tourism Council brings us details on some of the more exciting events that are happening in the borough. Here's this week's report.
Hey, Jeff, keeping up with the sort of open houses theme, Sunnyside Gardens, the neighborhood in Queens, which is, well, right next to Sunnyside, is actually turning 100 this October. And there's a celebration at Colonial Court, which is Sunnyside Gardens is made up of a bunch of different courts. Colonial Court is the first one that was built or finished, and it's basically between 48th and 47th Street and between Skillman Avenue and 43rd Avenue. It actually turns 100 on Saturday, October 12th. And so there will be a sort of a celebration at the Sunnyside Reformed Church on Saturday, October 12th, starting at 2. It'll be a bunch of historians will be there, a bunch of scholars. We'll be talking about the history of the community, the whole idea behind the philosophy that led to sort of utopian living, which is what they were going for back in the 1920s. Former residents will come back to share their memories of growing up there and so on and so forth. So it should be a lot of fun, and it's at the Sunnyside Reformed Church, which I mentioned, which is on the corner of 48th Street and Skillman Avenue in Sunnyside. Again, Saturday, October 12th at 2 p.m. Happy birthday, Sunnyside Gardens.
Thanks, Rob. That's just a few of the things that are going on in Queens. And the best way to discover and explore everything else that's on the horizon is to head right over to the It's in Queens website. And that website address is itsinqueens.com. And by the way, if you are more interested in learning about business in Queens, how to help your business or a friend's business, well, then head right over to the QEDC's website at queensny.org. And don't forget to sign up for their newsletter while you're there. Now, when you head out for Open House New York, or really any day, any week, any year in Queens, we always ask this: snap some photos, share them with us, and use the hashtag #It'sInQueens on X and Instagram, because your photo could become our photo of the week. I'm your host, Jeff Simmons, and that's it for this week's It's in Queens podcast.